Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I'm Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists.
We're here with Malabama.
Hi, everybody.
TK Coleman is here.
What it is.
We've got the rest of our team here in the studio as well. And coming up today on this free public minimal episode, we're joined by sleep expert Jack Dell'Accio. And we're talking to him about sleep problems. Oh, we got so much to talk about. We also have an outstanding lightning round question, listener tip, and added value segment for you. You can check out the full 2-hour maximal edition of episode 360, where we answer 4 times the questions, and we dive deep into several simple living segments like a mass it or trash it, obsolete objects, and a minimalist home tour. That private podcast episode is out right now at patreon.com/The Minimalists. Your support keeps our podcast 100% advertisement free because advertisements suck.
Yeah, they do.
Alabama, where would you like to start today?
Let's start with a question from Kristen in Nashville, Tennessee.
Hi, this is Kristen from Nashville. How can couples navigate sleep issues together without distancing themselves from one another or offending one another? For example, I've had a long-term relationship before with someone who snored so intensely, I spent many nights sleeping in another room, even when I'd have preferred not to. I, too, use a sound machine to sleep because white noise helps me get a better night's sleep. What are your dating and relationship sleep best practices?
Jack, I want to throw this to you in a moment because my wife and I, we have different sleep patterns, and she struggled with sleep a lot more than I do. I'm typically a sleeping savant, except last night I got a titch of food poisoning, so I was up most of the night. And so maybe that's my first pro tip is don't get food poisoning. I don't know if that helps you out very much, though. Kristen, what I will say is it's fascinating that sometimes it does make sense to sleep in a separate room if you have a partner who is loud or rolling around, or if last night, if I was rolling around and disturbing my wife, she's going to get a poor night's sleep because it's constantly being disrupted. I use something called an Oura Ring to track my sleep. It's not a sponsor at all, obviously. You know, you could use an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or any of these other products that track your sleep. And I find that to be useful because it tells me about where I need to improve and perhaps what I can do better over a long period of time. However, looking at one day's worth of data, like if I just look at my data from last night, that'd be a bit of a problem.
That's kind of, you hit the nail right on the head. It's not about your day-to-day results. And when we're working with athletes and all that, we really try to have them look at the very least only a week's worth of sleep at a month. Look at it in 1 week increments and not daily increments, because you're first of all, there's so many different products out there, different readers, and they could be off by 50% one given day just because of environments, sounds, movements, everything that may be distracting it. But if you're looking at your results over a week, over a month, then making improvements on it, that makes a real difference. And that's when those devices become useful.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. When I was a kid, I remember watching like different TV shows and they were sleeping in separate beds. And I didn't realize it was because like they didn't, they were censoring like married couples sleeping in the same bed. But I always thought that was weird. But then I actually started to notice it with like relatives and like different people where I'm like, oh wow, like they've been married for so long and they sleep apart. And for me, that's strange. But like, it's funny because Mariah and I now, we don't sleep apart, but we have this like the adjustable bed. Mm-hmm. And she hates it being adjusted and I love it being adjusted. So we have 2 twin mattresses pushed together.
So you essentially sleep on separate beds.
So we essentially sleep on separate beds. And I'm just wondering in like 10 years, are we going to be in different rooms? No, probably not. I had the snoring problem too, but I've done a lot of things to kind of correct that. But yeah, do you got any advice for couples? Like how do they sleep well together?
Well, first of all, oddly enough, it's a growing thing. People are sleeping separately, separate rooms, separate beds. Reminds me back of the Flintstones.
Yeah,
and I was a little shocked to hear that just a couple of years ago. But some people that I know very well and well-known people out there are, have their 2 beds where they're apart and their 3rd bed where they're together. So that seems to be a growing thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I don't think that that's the norm. I don't think that's where people want to take their relationships either. And it is things to deal with. And everyone's got to focus on their space. One of the big solutions is what you were describing, that the two independent beds actually do make substantial difference.
Yeah.
If they're married together, it does seem like one bed. So you are able to roll over to one side to the other. So you're getting the benefits. But also because you can adapt to some of the sleep challenges that every individual has. So the one person who's snoring can slightly increase the angle of their back, and that will take away some of the pressure in their chest and reduce some of the snoring. So there are tactics that you can use to reduce the snoring, but everything comes down to trying to align yourselves. My issue at home, I have a personal issue at home, is that my wife will go to bed 3 hours before me. So she's ending her sleep cycle 3 hours before me. So when I'm kind of still want to get going, and sometimes she'll just turn on a TV or turn on a radio but just like I bother her when I'm typing for the first 3 hours that she's sleeping.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I do think from a few people that I've coached that have had this issue, they've got to be a little considerate and really look at how this can blend together and be aware of that sleep environment, from the sounds to the lights, and be conscious, because it's not just the snoring. It could be a TV set, could be lights, could be a computer that's on. Got to eliminate all of these surrounding distractions and stimulants.
Yeah,
Jack,
absolutely.
I'm going to give you 5 things that I have done with my wife, because she actually goes to bed after me. I tend to get up way before her. So one thing that we've done, and this is not on my list of 5 things, is we sleep apart half the time. So we have a little guest house, back house, and I'm so grateful I got to sleep in there last night, because I didn't keep her up all night as I was dealing with the issues that I had. But I tend to be a champion sleeper, and I wasn't always that way. And my wife is very similar. She was a very light sleeper, and everything disturbed her. And so I would encourage folks to save this episode and go back, because I'm going to recommend some things that are mechanical things that are simple tweaks that you can fix. Here are 5 of them, and then later in the private podcast, I have 12 more things to talk about with you, Jack. So the first thing that I did that really helped my sleep is I sleep on a grounding mat. In fact, you're sitting on a grounding mat right now. So is Ryan, so is TK. But sleeping on a grounding mat, the ones we have are from earthing.com, not a sponsor. It's just we've had Clint Ober on the podcast before. But grounding really helped regulate my sleep. It improved my wife's deep sleep. It gave her more deep sleep. It actually gave me more REM sleep. And so it balanced out the sleep. When Danny started sleeping on one, we have Danny Unknown here, he and his fiance, they immediately started having more vivid dreams. They noticed they were grounding, and it really helped them out. The second thing I did is lots of sunlight, especially first thing in the morning. I don't just sit there and in my house and hide under the fluorescent lights or the LED lights. I go out and I see the sun on my skin and through my eyes and on my face, and I notice that resets my circadian rhythm in a way. 3 other things. I sleep with a sleep mask. The particular brand I use is called a Sleep Master. I recommend this to everyone. We'll put a link to the one that I use in the show notes. It's the one that Ryan uses. It's the one that Professor Sean uses, and several other people that I know. My wife uses this as well. A sleep mask. It really, really helps with, especially when you're traveling as well. But it helps at home. Every night, right before I go to bed, I just put the sleep mask on. It's beautiful. Last thing is a nice pillow for me. Now, of course, a mattress, and we're going to be talking about mattresses later, but everyone is a little bit different here. My wife and I have radically different pillows. I have one from a company called bedgear.com, and she tried it out and hated it. Like, couldn't sleep, cramps in her neck. My wife seems to like to take a pillowcase and put about 3 Chipotle napkins in it. And that's about the thickness of pillow she wants.
That's about how mine is too. So we just washed our pillows recently, and I got the lumpiest pillow. So I need to buy a new pillow, actually.
But that's the thing. The pillow that works well for me doesn't work well for my wife. It may not work well for you, etc. And I think those 5 things, if you change those 5 things first, that's the low-hanging fruit. I have a dozen other things I want to talk about. But Jack, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm really happy that you dove into that, because I'm not aware how aware you guys were going to dive into sleep, right? So I'm completely impressed with that. And I love it because we really get into deep analysis on what makes people sleep. And part of it involves the impacts of electric smog, 3G, 4G, 5G. And that's something that when you're generally talking to a general consumer or general public, they're not getting it really.
Yeah.
But you're talking about grounding mats, and we're in a position where we work with institutional customers, and we work with athletes, and we work with our consumer followers who want something different, who are open-minded. But because we have that such a wide variety, when we come up with a product, everything needs to be evidence-based.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been analyzing blood work and understanding how cell activities, your cellular blood cell activities, changes based on your electrical devices, your phones, your computers, during active downloads, during active phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually disrupting your body.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all parts of how your body's not at proper rest.
Mm-hmm.
So we work with quantum energy and really looking on how we stop those situations from happening. So today we actually have a mineral formula that we've put into our products as well, which eliminate any of those impacts from happening. So equivalent to what would have been a grounding mat, however, a little bit more up to date because it also impacts all the data signals that are everywhere.
EMF, et cetera.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, here's what I'll say to Kristen. Every choice you make cuts off other possibilities. So, yes, it is true that if you're choosing to sleep in a bed with someone who's disturbing you, you'll probably be disturbed. Now, you can help them, like I help my wife, be less disturbed. She sleeps very soundly now. She is also a champion sleeper, if still a bit of a light sleeper, but she has improved dramatically. Now, I am a big-time cuddler at night, so...
yeah, he is.
Ryan knows this because we've been on tour together, and he would wake up, and I'm just holding on to him. We're in separate beds, and somehow I'm holding on to him. I just want to cuddle, Ryan.
I know, man. I know. It stems from childhood.
Yes. Yeah.
The only thing I'll throw in here is with Mariah and I, because like we have different sleep schedules too, but like we have an agreed, like last night we were like, okay, let's get in bed at this time. We're going to read this book. And then we sit and we read a book, we get sleepy, we go to sleep together. That doesn't happen every single night, but I know that when that happens, her and I both get better sleep for sure. But do you and Michelle, you guys go to bed at the same time?
I'm making a conscious effort to do more of that.
Yeah.
It used to be the case that I would stay up a little bit later, but I just don't want to do the night owl thing anymore.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel
It doesn't
right.
work.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, in my 20s, you said 20 years ago you started getting into sleep. 20 years ago, I thought that I could like sleep 3 hours a night and get used to it.
Yeah.
And I was specifically like only getting 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Like I'm going to train my body to go out for 3 or 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to catch up on my sleep over the last 20 years that I missed out on.
But when we sleep together, like we do life together more effectively.
Amen.
You know?
Yeah.
One thing I'll say is that we all hear people say communication is the lifeblood of relationships, but sometimes we regard certain things to be too mundane to be topics for communication. And I think it's easy for sleep to become one of those things. And I would encourage you to talk about your problems and your priorities as it pertains to sleep. So if you're a cuddler like Josh and that's a need, it's important to spell that out, right? And it's important to say, hey, here's what I'm not willing to live without, or here's what I absolutely have to have. Here are my expectations. Here's where you're irritating me when we sleep at night. You'd be amazed at how many of those things just go unsaid. And when you talk about it, put it all on the table, then the two of you can get a plan together to work on your sleep and make time to do it together, or make time to get what you need when you can't do it together.
I'm going to get you a cuddle pillow.
Josh, I already do that. You can't stop me from cuddling. Jack, do you want to wrap up Kristen's question here before we move on?
I think there's also needs to be an effort of using your bed for primarily sleep. What I mean by that is not work, not read, not have life. And in fact, one of the things is when you wake up in the morning, don't hang out in bed. Get out of bed. If you want to do something, crawl up on the floor and open your laptop. But the brain, the body has this memory, and it's easily trained. That's why it's impacted by its surrounding, by its habits. The circadian rhythm is something that's memorized by the body as well. And if the more activities you're doing in bed when it comes to, again, TV, work, any type of brain stimulation, your brain will be active when it goes to bed rather than preparing itself for the onset of sleep.
The bed is meant for two things, sleeping and sex. So get the damn TV out of the bedroom.
Amen.
Ryan, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It's time for the lightning round where we answer your text messages. You can text your questions, your comments to 937-202-4654.
Yes, indeed. Now, Jack, during the lightning round, this is where we and our guests do our best to answer questions with a short, shareable, less than 140 character response, but not really. Professor Sean puts a minute on the clock for you so you can ramble on a bit. We have a question today from Barb. By the way, we put the text to these, we call them minimal maxims. We put them in the show notes so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media if you'd like. And you can find all of our minimal maxims in one place now, minimalmaxims.com. Alabama, what's Barb's question?
How much deep sleep are we really supposed to get nightly?
So here's my pithy answer for you. You can put a minute on the clock for me, Professor Sean. One man's enough is too much for the next man. Now, what do I mean by that? We all have individual needs. I've noticed this with my wife. We'll often go to bed at the same time, and I will get through my sleep cycles, and I will wake up an hour, 2 hours before her, but I'll still end up with more deep sleep or more REM sleep than her. And so figuring out what is enough is individual. It's perspectival. Well, I did that in less than a minute. Let's put a minute on the clock for Ryan Nicodemus.
My pithy answer is this: living well will help you sleep well. And I think we covered this. Exercise, not drinking caffeine past a certain time, cutting out alcohol, not eating before bed. I mean, all of these things are going to help you get better deep sleep. I mean, to sit here for me to measure my deep sleep every single night is going to stress me out. Rather, I would just like have some good habits in my life that will, by default, help me get better deep sleep. Now, I don't know how true this is, but I read this article about how deep sleep, there's a specific doctor who was talking about how deep sleep can be connected directly with Alzheimer's. Have you heard this at all?
I have, yes.
Okay. Is there any truth to that?
I haven't done any of that type of research or studying on it, but that's
But you're aware of the research out
I'm
there.
aware of the research. I've got a close friend that's very involved in that, and they're following it really closely.
Yeah. It's nothing that's proven yet, but there are some like loose links or even not so loose links tied to Alzheimer's. So yeah, deep sleep is definitely important.
I will say this with your last 6 seconds, it's also tied to schizophrenia, having less deep sleep. And so it's something worth, I'm out of time. Let's put a minute on the clock for TK Coleman.
All right, here's my pithy. I said it right for the first time in history. Here's my pithy. The only thing you're supposed to do is discover what works for you and then dive in. Whenever you're struggling between a few different viable options, I would say create a low-cost experiment where for a predetermined amount of time and a predetermined cost, you can explore it to see how you feel afterwards. You can do almost anything for 30 days. I tend to like 30-day experiments in personal development or 30-day personal development projects where I say, I'm going to try this thing for 30 days. And then afterwards, I'm going to take a look at my results and ask myself, do I want more of this or do I want less of this? So many growth strategies, health practices, and personal development techniques are similar to clothes. You know if a shoe fits by trying it on. You know if a shirt fits by trying it on. And it's not until you try it on that you can actually tailor it to your unique situation.
That's beautiful. Right under a minute, too. Look at that. So, Jack, let's take us home here. With Barb, she really wants to know about deep sleep and how much is enough, how much is too little. What do you have to say to her?
So, in all the cases that we work with, we're looking at everyone's got a certain amount of deep sleep and REM sleep that they're getting with all their bad habits and all the negative routines. So the point for us is, how do we improve it? Because everyone improving, and that's where I was telling you earlier about some of the players, we're getting minimum 20% improvement. Well, that's going to be the game changer. That's going to be the life changer. So if you're getting, only 20% in deep sleep cycles, and we get that to 24%, 25%, that's actually life-changing. And so that's where you're right on, where this is individual for everyone. Some people will manage to clock in 2 hours, some people will manage to clock in 3 hours. But the difference is, if we're taking you to 2 hours to 2 hours and 15 minutes, it's a game changer for you. 3 hours to 3 hours and 20 minutes. So that's really, there's no one number that matches for everyone. But the goal is, how do you create this environment, and how do you eliminate these stimulants to bring up that number? Because REM sleep will have direct link to mental recovery. Deep sleep will have direct links to your physical recovery. You'll get off that injury list a lot sooner. We were doing a lot of work with players and trainers, even looking at concussions. Ultimately, sleep and these deep sleep cycles are the foundation to all of your wellness.
Yeah, your healing, everything else.
Everything.
Well, that's pithy too. You could tweet
that's
that.
the pithy one right there. Deep sleep is relation to your overall wellness. That's great.
Here's what I'll say to wrap this up is I noticed when I first got with my wife, and she started tracking her sleep, she was getting around 9 minutes a night of deep sleep, almost no deep sleep.
Wow.
And now she's getting over an hour, sometimes 2 hours a night because of those dozen things that we talked about earlier on the private podcast. Tweaking each one of those gave 5% here, 7% there, 8% there. And all of a sudden, she's getting multiple hours a night of deep sleep. Totally changed her life. It's like she's a totally different person. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Jack for being here today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here, man. This is great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We'll put a link to his company, Essentia, in the show notes. Malaban, we got so much more to talk about, some other segments. Mal, you and I are going to argue a bit about light bulbs.
I'll be the referee.
We're going to do a home tour as well. But what else you got for us in the meantime?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hi, this is Marissa from South Bend, Indiana. I recently had a packing party for my iPhone. I removed all my apps from the home screen, which is different than deleting them. This means they will just be on the last page and you have to search for it by name to bring it up. Then for 2 weeks, when I needed an app, I would add it back to my home screen. After the 2 weeks were done, I deleted all the apps I didn't use anymore.
All right, y'all. Before we get to our added value segment this week, big thanks to Jack Dell'Accio from Essentia. We'll put a link to Essentia in the show notes. You can check out their non-toxic mattresses and see if that is something that appeals to you. We also dive deep into a whole bunch of sleep tips from him on the private podcast. Real quick, for right here, right now, here is one thing going on in the life of the minimalist. We've completed 2 Sunday symposiums so far, and we're getting ready to go into our 3rd Sunday symposium. It's in Los Angeles. Only 200 people, really nice, intimate setting. We have musical guests. We have special surprises. Noon on a Sunday. You can find it at sundaysymposium.com. Ryan, tell me about your Sunday symposium experience so far.
It was awesome, man. Really enjoying it. Looking forward to doing more.
TK, how about you?
Man, what I love the most is just the people coming together and seeing how much laughter there is in the room, how much connection there is in the room. And I'm just looking forward to continue to build on that.
Me too. What I really like here is we're building this community. There are free tickets available. There's pay-for tickets as well if you want to help support us in paying the staff and the venue. Obviously, it's not free to throw an event like this. We wanted to make it accessible to everyone, but only to 200 people, to keep it intimate, keep it small, keep it meaningful. And we're trying to find different ways to interact with the audience when we're there. You can find all the details over at sundaysymposium.com. For our added value this week, Bex and I have been downloading this show called Severance. Have you heard of it, Ryan? Have you seen it?
I have not, but I've heard awesome things. This is on Apple, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. You're like the 10th person to tell me that. It's on Mariah and I's list.
I put it off forever. We don't watch a whole lot of shows now that we don't have a TV or internet at home, so I have to go to a coffee shop and like download an episode at a time.
To your computer?
Yes. And as I'm doing that, you have to be really selective, right? But then we watched the first episode of this and it was like, oh, the minimalist set design, absolutely stunning. It explores this stew of seemingly separate philosophical quandaries. And I think that's why TK will really enjoy it. So like, what is consciousness? What does it mean to be human? Are there benefits to escapism? How can work be meaningful to one person and completely meaningless? That same work can be meaningless to the next person, right? And it's really a show about work-life balance. Your brain gets severed. And so your work self is now different from your at-home self.
This sounds a lot like Westworld.
In many ways, it's like a minimalist version of Westworld.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah, and although it's completely different in its premise, and what I'll say is all of these philosophical quandaries that don't seem tied together at all, somehow they loop it all together. But it's really about the self. And if I'm a different version at work than I am at home, is it 2 separate selves? And which one is me? And so ultimately, it's about this concept of work-life balance. And
Wow.
you know, if you're a longtime listener to the Minimalist, we think there's no such thing as work-life balance. No one asks about like driving life balance or eating life balance. It's just one area in which we say work is this and then enjoying life is something else. And it really comes out in the show in really strange ways.
What made you watch this?
It looked beautiful in the trailer. Like, it was beautifully shot, the lighting, the atmospherics. It seemed really harsh, minimalistic, but then the depths of the story is what made me keep watching it.
Yeah, it's always good to get a good recommendation, but there's something special about discovering something really cool like that no one told you about.
By the way, Ryan, we got a bunch more surprise questions on the private podcast this week, like, what are some non-toxic mattress options for sensitive people? What things positively and negatively affect your circadian rhythm? How does artificial light harm our sleep? Plus a million more questions for Jack and the Minimalists. And if you want to hear all that, Malabama, tell them what to do.
Check out the Minimalists private podcast. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly Maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You'll also gain immediate access to all of our archives, recordings of live events, weekly home tours, and our private community of thousands of open-minded minimizers like you. You can comment on this episode at youtube.com/theminimalists. If you have a question or listener tip for our podcast, give us a call, 406-219-7839, or email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. Follow The Minimalists on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter @The Minimalists. And to get our podcast show notes in your inbox, sign up for our email list at theminimalists.com.
Thank you, Malabama. That is our show for today. On behalf of Ryan Nicodemus, TK Coleman, Malabama, Podcast Sean, Jordan No More, Professor Sean, Social Jess, Danny Unknown, Post-Production Peter, Emma the Immigrant, and the rest of our team. There's so many of you. No wonder I'm losing sleep at night. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn. If you leave here today with just one message, let it be this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
Peace.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.